Unveiled terror. The 7-foot cursed silent giant who shattered 9 masters' throats in darkness. The streetlights flickered on the unassuming streets of Maplewood, but shadows darted behind the plain, weary homes. People dared not utter the name of the threat looming nightly, a nefarious giant who devoured whispers and nightmares. Sarah, a worn-out nurse at Maplewood General, braced herself against the creeping chill as she trudged home from another grueling night shift. The aura of unease thickened in the air, a shroud clinging to her skin, whispering that something was dreadfully wrong. It was the kind of silence that sank deep into the pit of your stomach, heavy and foreboding. When Sarah entered her home, the unsettling stillness enveloped her. Her heart raced as she found her husband slumped over the kitchen table, his grip tight around the morning paper. The headline glaring back at her screamed, "9 local men missing, the dark truth no one will speak of." Panic surged through her. "Mark!" she shouted, shaking him vigorously, her voice cracking on the edge of fear. His eyes were wide, yet lifeless, a void where warmth and love used to dwell. She stumbled back, her breath hitching in her throat. Joshua appeared, rubbing his eyes. "Mommy, the giant was here again," he said, his tiny voice trembling. She fought the urge to dismiss his terror as childhood nightmares, but her hands shook, and the air seemed to carry his fear. "What did he look like?" she asked, forcing her voice to steady. "He was big, taller than Daddy, and his hands were dark, like shadows." A cold sweat dripped down Sarah's back. This couldn't be real, could it? Yet, how could she brush off the chilling dread creeping through her veins? Desperately, she called the sheriff's office, her voice cracking with urgency. The sheriff leaned back in his chair, eyes barely lifting from the report in front of him. "Ma'am, nothing's going on. Just urban legends," he said dismissively. The deputies smirked, their indifference cutting deeper than a knife. The weight of their mockery settled on her shoulders, and with it came the realization the citizens of Maplewood were enmeshed in a silence thicker than any fog. Determined, Sarah dove into her research. It didn't take long for chilling details to unravel. Each man who'd gone missing had been on the trail of this ominous giant, trying to uncover the truth. But what truth remained hidden, swallowed by the void of fear? The stories hinted at a monster punishing the dishonest, leaving behind hollowed corpses and haunting echoes. Was it folklore or a grim reality? The knots in her stomach twisted tighter as her husband refused to discuss what lay in those pages, and every neighbor averted their eyes. One stormy night, as lightning illuminated her path home, Sarah felt the air shift. A deafening silence engulfed her, and out of the shadows materialized a towering figure, 8 feet of darkness looming beyond the streetlight's reach. Fear coursed through her in ice-cold waves. Suddenly, from behind her, a heart-stopping scream shattered the stillness. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As her blood turned to ice, she knew she was being hunted. Jeremy's terrified gaze found hers, and the silhouette edged closer, sinister and looming. The truth was more terrifying than she could ever fathom. Were her neighbors the ones feeding the giant's insatiable hunger? The weight of betrayal crushed her as the reality set in. Was she already too late to save her son from the darkness creeping towards them? Sarah's heart raced as the scream pierced the thick air around her. It was a sound of pure terror, echoing through the night, and her instinct screamed that it was a warning. She turned just in time to see Jeremy disappear around the corner of their home, the shadow stretching impossibly long behind him, as if it were trying to pull him into the void. "Jeremy!" she cried, but her voice came out in a desperate gasp, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. The looming figure moved closer, its breathing deep and heavy, filling the silence with an unbearable weight. Panic flooded her as she took a step forward, praying she could catch up to her son, but her feet felt like lead. The silhouette blended with the night, a mass of threatening darkness that overshadowed everything. She could barely make out its features, but the glint of its eyes pierced through the shadows, reflecting a cruel hunger. Instinctively, she reached for her phone, fumbling to illuminate the darkness with its weak glow. The beam flickered weakly, barely penetrating the oppressive night air, revealing only fragments of her surroundings. A garbage can tipped over, the neighbor's wind chime swaying eerily. Then she heard it, a low growl rumbling from somewhere deep in the giant's throat. The growl seemed to resonate in her bones, unearthing a primal fear that made her skin crawl. She bit her lip, fighting to stay grounded as her world tilted dangerously. What was this creature? What had it taken? As if on cue, the shrill sound of another scream erupted from somewhere nearby, followed by a sickening silence. It was a reminder that the giant was not just a figment of fear. It was very real, and it was hunting. "Mommy!" Jeremy's voice pierced through the stillness again, closer now, but tinged with terror. She turned, pushing through fear, racing back towards the sound. Each step pounded like thunder in her ears. "Jeremy!" she yelled, desperation clawing at her throat. "Where are you? Stay where you are!" The shadows darted, twisting around her with every pounding heartbeat. They were alive, sentient forms that seemed to respond to her panic, closing in around her and tightening their grip. Then she felt a presence behind her. The air shifted, electricity crackling. She froze, heart pounding, spine prickling. The hairs on her neck stood on end, and it was all she could do to keep from turning around. But she knew turning around was a mistake. "Mommy, I'm scared!" Jeremy's small voice trembled, and she could hear him struggling to keep his fear at bay. She had to reach him. "Just hold on, baby," she said, voice shaky but resolute. "I'm coming." In that moment, for the first time, she heard whispers around her. Soft, slithering murmurs that echoed like secrets on the wind. They spoke of injustice, of betrayal, of men who had dared to confront the giant only to vanish into nothingness. The realization struck her with a searing jolt. Those whispers belonged to the souls of the fallen, the souls silenced by the very monster she was trying to face. A sudden rustle nearby pulled her back to the present. The giant moving, its shadow shifting as it turned towards her, the abyss of its darkness beckoning. She had to keep moving. She could not let him find her son. With renewed urgency, she ducked low, slipping into the dense underbrush of her garden. The darkness enveloped her, providing a momentary cover, but the whispers grew stronger, their warnings echoing in her mind. Suddenly, she heard a loud thump. There was no mistaking it. It was footsteps, heavy and deliberate. And then she saw him. The giant, stretching up against the stars, towering, monstrous. Breath hitching, she knew the time for running was running out. "This ends now," she whispered to herself, resolve hardening in her chest. She needed to confront the creature, to uncover the truth that had held Maplewood captive. But that meant facing not only the giant, but also the shadows of her own fears. In that moment, she glimpsed a flicker of movement behind the giant, a flash of a familiar face lurking in the darkness, waiting. Who was it? A neighbor? A friend? Did they know more than they let on? Sarah's breath quickened as dread settled in. She had to unravel the web of terror before the darkness swallowed her whole. Tomorrow would be the day she sought answers. And as she prepared herself, one thought echoed in her mind. Was she truly ready for the truth that awaited her in the heart of Maplewood? The night felt heavier now, like a thick blanket draping over everything, suffocating and claustrophobic. Sarah crouched low, her heart hammering in her chest, each thud echoing the terror that gripped her tighter. Through the curtain of shadows, was that a figure? A face? Her instinct screamed to flee, but she forced herself to remain still. The whispers grew louder, slithering through her mind, desperate for her attention. They beckoned her to listen, to understand what had been concealed beneath that crushing silence. With every flicker of hope, a deeper dread urged her toward the truth she dreaded to face. "Mommy!" Jeremy's voice pierced the darkness again, raw with fear. The sound jolted her into action, propelling her between thick bushes and the wooden fence of their yard. Shadows twisted and warped around her as she darted towards the voice. Grasping hands, ghostly remnants of what might have been, tugged at her clothes, threatening to hold her back. The moon hung in the sky, weary and pale, casting long shadows that danced around her, teasing her with fleeting glimpses of movement. She had to find Jeremy, had to. She couldn't let fear steal him from her. "Jeremy!" she yelled, feeling the words stretch thin and fragile in the thick air. Each breath felt like a task, heavy on her lungs. Her eyes darted around, scanning the darkness for any hint of his form. Then she caught sight of him, small and trembling, at the far end of the yard. Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived when she saw what lurked behind him. The giant loomed like a nightmare, an impenetrable wall of darkness with glowing eyes that pierced the night. It exhaled a low rumble, shifting slightly, closing the distance with unsettling silence. Sarah's heart dropped. She was too late. "Jeremy, get away!" She charged forward, but the ground shifted beneath her feet. The whispers swarmed her, wrapping around her mind with painful insistence. They were warning her, but their voices twisted into a cacophony, drowning out her thoughts. "Leave! Leave! Leave!" they hissed, urging her to turn back, to abandon her child. She wanted to obey, but her son was there, his figure dimming in the giant's shadow. Moving through thick brush, she reached him just as he turned, his face a mask of terror. "Mommy, it's going to get us!" "Not while I'm here," she breathed, grabbing his small, trembling hand. Together they turned to face the giant. But it wasn't just a creature of size. It flickered like static on a broken screen. The image distorted, taking painful shapes of people she recognized, those whom the whispers had belonged to. Their faces twisted in agony, mouths stretched in silent screams. But they weren't just watching. They were pleading for help, for release. "Stay close, Jeremy." The giant let out another growl, one that shook them both to their core. It moved closer, urging Sarah to reconsider, to drop her precious child, to submit to fear. Casting a quick glance behind, she saw movement among the shadows, figures emerging, moving with purpose. The familiar face she'd seen earlier surfaced among them. A neighbor, Bill, eyes clouded with madness and panic. "Help me! You must!" Before he could finish, the giant lunged forward, the sound of its crushing weight looming over them. Sarah grabbed Jeremy, pulling him tight against her as the darkness rushed in, swallowing Bill's final breath. Everything fell silent. "What do we do now?" Jeremy whimpered, voice trembling. The words hung in the air, as disorienting as the darkness itself. Before she could respond, the whispers intensified again. They carried a message, urgent and frightening. If you want to escape, you must uncover the giant's secret. With dread settling over her, one horrifying thought struck like lightning. What if to confront the giant meant confronting everything she had buried within herself? As the darkness pulsated around them, Sarah gathered her strength to face the revelation head on. The heart of Maplewood wouldn't stay silent for much longer, and she had only started to scratch the surface of its horrors. The future awaited, dripping with uncertainty and dread. As the creature's presence loomed over them and mere survival hung by a thread. Could they truly face the darkness together, or would it consume them both? "Mommy!" Jeremy's voice trembled as it collided with the suffocating silence. The moon, now obscured by an angry gathering of clouds, transformed the night into an abyss, swallowing any glimmers of hope. Sarah could feel the heartbeat of darkness wrapping around her, a sinister fabric that tightened with every passing moment. "We have to move," Sarah whispered urgently, dragging her son along, the grip on his hand a lifeline in the overwhelming dread. The giant pulsed behind them, an entity of nightmares, its form now morphing between shapes, reminding her of the faces from her past, contorted in pain. She could feel them pressing in, like ghosts slipping through the cracks of her mind. "Where do we go?" Jeremy cried, tears streaming down his cheeks. His eyes flickered wildly, reflecting the emerging shadows. "Anywhere but here," she urged, darting toward the far side of the yard where trees loomed like sentinels. The whispers escalated, filling her ears with haunting echoes of her memories. Each voice strained against her sanity, relentless in their angry chorus. "Get out! Get out! Release us!" The chaos twisted her stomach, clawing at her resolve as she stumbled ahead. As she breached the edge of the trees, she gasped. A clearing emerged, illuminated by the dim halo of flickering light that seemed to pulse with life. Hope, however fragile, flickered within her chest. "Look!" Jeremy pointed, voice barely above a whisper. "That cabin!" The cabin, though old and crumbling, stood defiantly against the back of the yard. It was a refuge, a sanctuary that beckoned her to come closer. But with every step she took, the memories in the shadows whispered louder, pulling at her, tugging her backward toward the horror. "No, forward!" she commanded, more to herself than anyone. They darted across the open ground as the giant's growling subsided, replaced by an unsettling stillness that filled the air. It was too quiet, too expectant, like the world holding its breath. Sarah pushed the door, which creaked ominously as it opened. Inside smelled of mildew and wood rot. The darkness felt alive, encroaching on her, wrapping its sinister fingers around her heart. "Stay close," she urged, stepping inside with Jeremy. The door slammed shut behind them, sending shudders down her spine. In the distorted shadows, vague shapes seemed to move, dancing just beyond her line of sight. "Mommy, I don't like it here," Jeremy whimpered. "Me neither," she admitted, her voice trembling. The whispers inside her head silently swirled, merging with the shadows around them. They carried secrets, the weight of 100 broken souls. Sarah felt their pain. It clawed at her own buried fears and regrets. A sudden noise pierced the stillness, a soft thud from above. Something shifted in the loft, a muted creak, followed by a rustle. The sound made her heart race, every muscle tensed. The giant was closer, lurking just outside. "Jeremy, we need to find a way to escape, something that can protect us," she declared, scanning for any weapon. The table lay scattered with dusty tools. She picked up a rusty hammer, its weight comforting in her palm. But still, the whispers surged, insistent and loud, drowning out everything else. They clawed at her resolve, speaking of truths she did not want to face. "It's not just the giant," they hissed, a warning wrapped in sorrowful demand. "Mommy?" Jeremy's small voice pulled her from the storm inside her head. Then, suddenly, a shadow loomed over them from the loft above. A twisted figure appeared, draped in darkness. Sarah felt her heart lurch as the whispers crescendoed into panic. Before she could process it, the figure lunged, and Sarah's scream mingled with the darkness. In that moment, the cabin felt more like a prison than a refuge. What would it take to uncover the truth? And now, with the giant looming just outside and shadows inside closing in, how could they escape? The depth of terror clawed at her, revealing a truth darker than she could have ever imagined. But as the void eagerly swallowed everything, Sarah realized she was about to face her past, and it would demand payment in blood. What secrets were buried here that the giant wanted her to find? The shadow dove through the air, and before Sarah could react, it was upon them. A figure twisted together from nightmares surged forward, its features obscured by darkness. "Mommy!" Jeremy shrieked, attempting to hide behind her, his small body trembling. A guttural sound resonated from the creature, a low growl that vibrated through the very floorboards beneath them. "Stay behind me!" Sarah shouted, adrenaline surging. She brandished the rusty hammer like a shield. Every breath came heavy and sharp in her lungs as the figure reared back, its form flickering like a faulty light bulb. It was then she noticed its eyes, dull and hungry, bearing witness to unspeakable horrors. She lunged forward, swinging the hammer with all her might. It connected with a sickening thud, but instead of faltering, the creature laughed, a dreadful wheezing sound that sent chills racing down her spine. It was unfazed, as if her blow barely registered. "What do you want?" Sarah cried, her voice echoing in the oppressive space. The whispers returned, filling her mind, growing louder and more frantic. They spoke of despair, of betrayal, and of secrets that lay entwined with every breath she took. "Mommy, please!" Jeremy's voice cut through the chaos, filled with fear. She glanced back, the hammer slipping slightly from her grip. In that brief moment of distraction, the creature lunged again, this time darting past the hammer's range and catching Jeremy by his shoulder. It lifted him effortlessly, its hand tightening around him, squeezing, drawing forth a fear-stricken gasp. "No!" Sarah screamed, her chest tightening as if the very air had become a vice. She swung the hammer again, this time desperately aiming for the figure's wrist. Pain flared through her arms as she struck, but the monstrous figure merely flinched, its eyes flashing with vacant rage. "Let him go!" The room pulsated around her, shadows warping and flickering like candle flames. The creature leaned closer, its breath a putrid gust that enveloped Jeremy. "Release," it hissed. The word echoed with all the weight of her buried fears, a chasm yawning open in her heart. It was not just demanding, but inviting. "Release what?" Sarah stammered, her resolve beginning to fade. "What do you want from us?" "Everything," it rasped in reply, as if the darkness celebrated their despair. "Your past, your pain." With a surge of instinctive rage, Sarah charged forward, body moving before her mind could process the full extent of danger. She swung at the creature's head, but it twisted out of reach, laughing as Jeremy cried out again. Then, all at once, the shadows suddenly grew still. Time paused, the whispers fading into hushed anticipation. Sarah felt a sliver of relief. The darkness was waiting for her to make a choice. "Let him go! I'll do anything!" she shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. No more running, no more trying to hide from the past. The figure paused, its grip loosening momentarily. The silence was thick, and fear coiled within her. "Face us," it whispered, a chorus rising from the depths. The walls seemed to thrum with life. "Unravel the truth. Betray the lie." The gravity of their words weighed on her as she felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. Dark memories began to swirl into focus. Faces, places, bits of her life she'd locked away. This creature, this thing, was just the gatekeeper, and whatever lay behind it was worse. As the world closed in on her, Sarah's heart raced violently. Could she salvage the pieces of her past? Would facing the truth release them all from this horror? Just as she was about to respond, the walls of the cabin trembled and the whispers returned in a thunderous roar. Suddenly, the floorboard shattered, splintering with a deafening crash, opening a void beneath her. "Mommy!" Jeremy screamed as they both faltered toward the darkness below. And then everything slipped. What awaited them below? Would the past truly emerge, or would this be the end? Falling. The sensation wrapped around Sarah like ice, consuming her entire being. Time distorted as they plunged into the gaping maw of darkness. Jeremy's scream echoed, blurring into eerie silence, swallowed by the void. Then, impact. They landed hard, but instead of the splintered wood she expected, they tumbled onto something soft, like damp earth. Confusion engulfed her as she sat up, adrenaline still surging. Flickering shadows danced around them, and the whispers became a cacophony, punctuated by a bone-chilling laughter that made her skin crawl. "Mommy!" Jeremy whimpered beside her, his voice a fragile thread in the darkness. She grabbed his hand, squeezing it tight. "Stay close," she urged, her throat dry, every word a struggle through her racing heart. The shadows shifted, swirling like smoke, forming grotesque shapes that snaked towards them. In the dim light, Sarah could just make out the outline of the creature that had tormented them above. It moved with sinuous grace, melding with the darkness, its jagged form unfurling, a living nightmare. "Release," the creature whispered again, the sound slithering into her mind. "Face your truth. Let go of your pain." "Stop!" Sarah shouted, as everything inside her screamed to fight back. "You don't own us! You don't control us!" The creature paused, its form flickering. For a heartbeat there was stillness, but then a surge erupted from the ground, rising like a tide of shadowy figures behind it. They emerged slowly, faces twisted in sorrow, mirrors of her past. Each one whispered her name, their eyes hollow, filled with a despair that felt all too familiar. Images of lost time, fractured friendships, and dark secrets slipped into focus like nightmare snapshots, dragging heavy chains around her heart. "No," she rasped, feeling the weight of years crashing over her shoulders. Memories she'd buried in the deepest parts of herself clawed their way out, demanding acknowledgement. The voices grew louder, filling her mind with truth, with guilt. "Face us," the figure commanded, its voice commanding yet soft. The shadows pulsed as if they were alive, closing in like an embrace she couldn't escape. "Mommy, I'm scared!" Jeremy cried out, his small voice barely a whisper against the growing torrent of dark energy. She felt his small hand tremble in hers. The shadows writhed closer, thickening with their desperation. She could smell decay, a foul stench that accompanied the echoes of sorrow. Panic clawed at her throat. Sarah stood, trembling, but determination fueled her. "I won't let you take him," she shouted defiantly. "Whatever you are." "I refuse to surrender!" The elemental cry burst from her, resonating through the dark void. The shadows faltered, recoiling as if struck, but not for long. They surged with renewed fury, their whispers morphing into a chilling chant, beckoning her. "Release. Hurdles of the past. Betray your fears." The words played on repeat, echoing through her mind like a song of sorrow. Sarah closed her eyes, battling against the swell of emotions. The shadows pressed against her, cold tendrils wrapping around her limbs, pulling her back toward her buried truths, their touch resembling ice, a poison threatening to freeze her spirit. And then, like a spark igniting a flame, she remembered something. Her mother's stories of love and loss, lessons wrapped in pain, but also in strength. These memories weren't chains, they were threads binding her to her true self. "Enough!" she screamed with renewed vigor, breaking through the oppressive weight of despair. The shadowy figures halted, and for one fleeting moment the darkness held its breath. "Face your fears to free him," the leader of the shadows hissed, the creature melting back into its lair of void. Sarah took a deep breath, forcing her heart to calm. "I will face you, all of you." But as she began to step forward, new shadows materialized from the darkness, looming larger and more menacing. An unnatural chill swept over them. Who or what awaited them now in this labyrinth of terror? Would, instead of release, this release of memories lead to destruction? The very walls around them began to crack, creaking under the weight of her fear. "Mommy, what's happening?" Jeremy whispered, his eyes wide and terrified, as a new darkness surged forward. And then she heard it, a deep, guttural growl that reverberated through the ground, shifting the very fabric of the air around them. What was coming for them now? The darkness shifted, a living entity breathing around them. Sarah tightened her grip on Jeremy's hand as fear coiled tightly in her chest. The growl echoed again, low and vibrating, shaking the loose dirt beneath their feet. Whatever was coming was big, very big. Then it emerged, a hulking figure, its towering height silhouetted against the faint glimmers of light that danced on the edges of the shadows. It resembled a man, yet something sinister lay just beneath the surface. The limbs were grotesquely elongated, fingers that tapered into sharpened ends, each movement like a predator stalking its prey. Its face, if it could be called that, lacked features. Eyes, where human expressions should be, were mere voids, deep and consuming. "Mommy!" Jeremy whimpered again, and in that voice she heard a quiver of terror that mirrored her own. "Stay behind me," she commanded, her heart racing, urging her fight-or-flight instincts to take over. She could almost taste the desperate stench of fear clinging to the air, mingled with the decay of regret from the memories that surrounded them. The creature took a step closer, and the ground cracked under its weight, splintering like ice beneath a relentless storm. Shadows licked at its heels, eager to devour. "Release," it whispered, but this time it was more guttural, as if the very words scraped from its throat. "Release, or endure forever." The malevolent force wrapped around her, binding her to that dark corner of her soul she'd managed to ignore. Sarah could feel the pressure of the shadows tightening, forming tendrils that snaked around Jeremy before she could react. Panic surged in her chest. "No!" she cried out, lunging forward, only to be met with the impenetrable wall of darkness. "Face your own truth," the creature growled, each word a serrated edge. The shadows were relentless, like the tide pulling her deeper, dragging Jeremy along with her. The whispering faces twisted in mockery around its body, their hollow eyes penetrating her. "Your past is the key," it continued, its voice a haunting echo. "Only by confronting it can you save him." The memory surged again, her failures as a mother, the promises she had broken. Each thought was a brick being added to a wall closing in on her. Her breath quickening, she dug her nails into her palms, urgency pushing against despair. "Jeremy, I won't let them take you," she screamed, forcing herself to focus. But the creature laughed, a deep rumble that felt like it came from her very soul. "Endure your shadows, or embrace the darkness within. What do you choose?" it taunted, looming closer, its breath thick with the smell of rot. More figures emerged from behind it, swirling masses of memory and pain, their hands reaching out, pulling. "I choose," she gasped, fighting back tears. The shadows closed in tighter, overlapping her sanity. Jeremy was still gripping her hand, his small body trembling like a leaf in a storm. "I choose to fight!" Fueled by her determination, she swung her arm outward, a desperate gesture, feeling the very fabric of the darkness waver as she pushed against it. But it was as if her will was merely a flickering candle in a hurricane. The creature poured forward, shadow spilling over her, a palpable weight threatening to crush them. The cacophony of whispers erupted, drowning her in a tidal wave of despair. "Mommy!" Jeremy cried, his voice piercing the blackness, vibrating through her like a bell tolling in agony. With a primal scream, Sarah felt something shift inside her, a surge of raw power she didn't know existed. But was it enough? The shadows were relentless, consuming all hope. As the creature loomed, preparing to strike, she realized they were more than just shadows. They were her past, laid bare, unrelenting and fierce. The moment hung in the air, pregnant with dread. Could she overcome it? Would she have to sacrifice everything to save her son? And then came the morbid snap of a branch nearby, echoing through the silence. What was that? Something else was lurking in the dark. Something that could change everything. Dread whispered in her ear, "You're not alone anymore." The stillness that followed was a thick blanket of tension. Sarah could feel it in her bones, a sickening pressure that clawed at her lungs. She turned her head, frantic for a glimpse of what had caused that sound. Was it another creature? Was it something even worse than what they faced? "Mommy, I'm scared." Jeremy's whisper sliced through her thoughts, pulling her back to the grim reality at hand. She felt his small body trembling against her side, his grip tightening around her fingers, a lifeline amidst the chaos. The growling faded momentarily, growing softer, but then it came back, more insistent, as if the creature itself were summoning something greater. Shadows etched themselves deeper into the ground, morphing and swirling like a living tapestry of nightmares. A rustle came from her left, a flash of movement. Sarah's heart skipped. She turned, ready to defend Jeremy at all costs. But what emerged wasn't anything she could have anticipated. It was a woman, her hair wild and tangled, face smeared with dirt, eyes wide with terror. She stumbled into the light, her clothes torn as if she had fought through thorns. "Run!" she screamed, a raw and desperate sound that sent chills racing down Sarah's spine. "It's coming! You have to run now!" As if sensing the rising panic, the hulking figure shifted. The woman's eyes widened even more, her body freezing in place like a rabbit caught in the gaze of a hawk. "Get away from it!" She threw herself toward them, arms flailing. "No! Stay back!" Sarah shouted, stepping protectively in front of Jeremy. The creature turned towards the new arrival, the voids of its eyes burning with hunger. "Release or endure," it roared, shaking the ground with its fury. The woman's scream was swallowed whole, and it was then Sarah realized the truth behind those words. This creature thrived on suffering. "What's happening?" Jeremy whimpered against Sarah's leg. She knelt to meet his gaze, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "I don't know, baby. Just hold on tight." The creature loomed over them now, the air thick with its oppressive presence. She could sense the dark energy swirling around them, a cyclone of fear that almost made her choke. A series of shrieks pierced the air, the sound of multiple souls crying in unison. Those ghostly figures started to emerge from the shadows, their faces grim and twisted, each one representing a fragment of her past. She felt her stomach churn, recognition flooding her system like poison. These were her mistakes, her regrets, embodied in miserable forms. Their mouths moving silently, mouthing unheard pleas. "Face your past!" the creature shrieked, extending a long, bony finger towards her. The shadows now whipped around like tentacles, each one grasping at her with icy fingers. Sarah grunted, fighting to keep Jeremy shielded behind her. She could feel it clawing at her sanity, feeding off her fear. Her memories erupted like trapped ghosts, memories of leaving Jeremy alone, of choices that put them both in danger. They wove in and out of the darkness, threatening to drag her and her son under. "I won't let you take him!" she shouted, her voice breaking the spell of horror for a fleeting moment. But that only seemed to amuse the creature, which twisted its mouth into a grin void of any humanity. The woman from earlier dashed past them, eyes wild with madness. "We have to go! It'll consume us!" She lunged towards the shadows, but before she got far, a thick tendril shot out, wrapping around her ankle and pulling her back with a swift jerk. "Mom!" Jeremy cried, tears streaming, but Sarah wouldn't let go. She couldn't afford to look away, couldn't afford to falter. "We can fight!" she shouted, steeling her resolve. But somewhere, an unsettling part of her quivered. Did she even have the strength to change what was coming? The creature leaned closer, the substance of its shadow seeping and swirling, its breath a chilling sigh that surrounded them. "Your truth is deeper than you realize," it echoed ominously. Suddenly, a sharp memory flashed in Sarah's mind. It flickered with significance, a solution buried deep in her consciousness. A missed opportunity, a path not taken. She felt the pull, felt its truth begin to unravel. But before she could grasp it fully, the woman, still fighting against the restraints of the darkness, howled, "Help me! Don't let it take you too!" The ground shuddered again, and in a heart-stopping moment, Sarah realized just how fragile their lives had become. "Jeremy!" The shadows pressed in, and then a flash, like glass shattering, a crack in the fabric of reality, and everything felt like it was about to collapse. "We can't stay here!" Her voice rose, desperate. The walls of shadow narrowed. She had to decide. Confront her past, or follow the spirit of despair whispering to her in the dark. A looming dread filled the air as the creature screeched, its voice echoing in her mind. "Choose now, or be consumed." And she knew the next moment would either drown them in darkness or ignite a flicker of hope. What would she do? Time was running out. She felt the shadows weigh upon her, their pressure so heavy it felt like a physical assault. Sarah clenched her teeth, adrenaline surging through her veins as she faced the creature's unearthly gaze. The specters of her past danced around her like cursed phantoms, twisting her memories into grotesque shapes and threats. "Mommy, please, don't let it get us." Jeremy's voice crawled through her fog of fear, a whisper of desperation that snapped her from her reverie. "We need to go. I need you to trust me," she urged, forcing back tears as she pulled him closer, shielded behind her. "Where?" he trembled, looking up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Anywhere but here!" Sarah shouted, her voice strained. The creature shuddered, its form flickering between the dim light and level darkness, distorting as it reveled in their fear. It fed on the anguish that dripped like poison from the air around them. The woman, still caught, screamed as the tendrils tightened its hold, dragging her back into the darkness. Sarah winced, a primal instinct rising in her chest. She had to act. With a deep breath, she felt the familiar gnaw of her regrets, but this time they were not blinding. They were vivid. "I can show you I've changed," she shouted to the creature, trembling but fierce. "I'm not the same." Its laughter shook the very ground beneath them, a sound of raw amusement. "False. You have built a past that will always hunger." "No!" she broke free, summoning every ounce of determination. Going back, reliving those decisions, it was suffocating. But she had to turn those regrets into strength. The twisted shapes of her memories surged up, faces emerging, pleading and accusing. Sarah saw herself in those moments, saw the choices she could have made. "You're wrong," she yelled, her voice echoing over the growling. "I can fight this! I will!" The shadows writhed, as if considering her words. But then, even as she fought against the despair starting to veil her vision, the woman's horrified eyes met hers. "You have to face them! They're part of you!" The terror spilled out of the woman as she clawed helplessly at the darkness. "Do not submit!" In that moment, a shuddered breath escaped Sarah. The chance to reclaim her life was before her, but it called for a confrontation with the very demons she'd tried to escape. "Jeremy, hold tight," she whispered, shifting into a defensive stance. She could feel the tendrils reach out again, thick and hungry, but she focused all her energy. It was time to confront the physical evidence of her failures. "I choose to face my past." The ground shook violently. Shadows swept over her, a tangle of despair and memory swirling dangerously close. "Let go of her! Let her go!" Jeremy screamed, his small body vibrating with fear, but also laced with determination. The creature howled in rage, the air vibrating with its ghastly sounds. A cold sweat stole over Sarah's skin as she felt a heart-wrenching instance of clarity. The spirits around her were legion, shackled by her own inaction. They touched her skin lightly, urging her to succumb, but anger burned brighter in her chest. "Enough!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the darkness like a blade. "I am more than my mistakes!" Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, pulling back just slightly as they felt her defiance. The air crackled with energy, a moment of vulnerability, trembling on the edge of freedom. But then, without warning, it lunged, its bulk surging forward, attempting to wrap around them both. "You cannot escape the past! It will consume you!" The ground shook violently, cracks splintering outwards like the chaos in her mind. In a heartbeat, her surroundings seemed to shift, the familiar trees of their backyard materializing as if they were fragments of. Forged their bond. The creature, furious, lunged with a roar, but it was too late. The light expanded, burning clearer and brighter, engulfing them in a hue of beautiful warmth and safety. The shadows shrieked, frantic and unraveling as the glow revealed who they were, Figures of her past, not as demons, but reflections of the choices she'd made, standing before her. "Face us," they pleaded, a chorus of voices rising into the moment, each one laced with pain, but also clarity. The woman from earlier materialized again, now filled with resolve. "You must learn that love and pain coexist, but you have the power to change your path." Sarah stepped forward as she faced her past. "You're right," she said, her voice unwavering. "I made mistakes that hurt us, but I also fought to love us better, to protect us." With each word, the light began to envelop the figures. As they merged with the glow radiating around her, she saw their despair transform into hope, anger giving way to understanding. "What you fear, you must embrace," the voices whispered. And Sarah felt the pull. It was not a rejection of her past, but an acceptance, a reclamation of the pieces she'd hidden. The shadows shrieked louder, thrashing violently in response to the light illuminating the darkness. "Stop!" the creature wailed as it twisted and writhed. "You can't choose weakness. You will endure." "No," Sarah rebuffed, feeling solid ground rising beneath her feet. "You are my past, but you will never consume this future." As she said the words, a pulse of energy surged from her heart, exploding outward in blazing arcs of light. The shadows withered, cracking apart as if shattered by an unseen force, revealing a path forward. "Mommy!" Jeremy squealed, a smile breaking through his tears. And in that moment, she felt supreme joy radiate even in the face of darkness. She saw the creature falter in the light, its features twisting into something almost comedic, the shadows fading away, stripping it of its power. Together, they took step after step, pulling away from the remnants of shadows as the harsh laughter of the creature faded into silence. "Now we can go home," Sarah said with a deep breath, both relief and hope swelling within her. The shadows, once oppressive and fierce, melted into wisps, dissipating like smoke in the wind, lifting her above the chaos of her life as her grip tightened around Jeremy's hand. As the light enveloped them, they caught sight of their backyard once more, now transformed. The moon hung peacefully in the sky, their home radiating warmth and safety. They stood together, silhouetted against the glow of the dawn breaking. "We did it, sweetheart," Sarah murmured, a sob of joy escaping her lips. "Yeah, we beat the giant," Jeremy cheered. And for the first time, Sarah allowed herself to imagine a future without fear, filled with the love they had built together. And there, wrapped in the morning light, she made a vow to never let shadows take control again, to always embrace the light and face the truths of her past with courage. As they walked back inside the house, she felt renewed, filled with love and determination. Maplewood would heal, and she, with Jeremy by her side, was ready to share their story. A tale of true strength against the darkest shadows and the undeniable bond between mother and child. They had fought, survived, and ultimately triumphed, and now they would thrive. So here's the deal, everyone. You need to subscribe now if you want more wild tales like this one. Smash that like button, seriously. It feeds the algorithm and helps me share more of these stories with everyone. And don't just sit there. Flood the comments section with your reactions. Let me know what you think of Sarah and Jeremy's journey. And for the love of all things epic, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to help grow our amazing community.